Trust Me Travel presents a series of travel videos called Travel Time with Robert and Tracy. Today we'll be talking about a remote island called Nuku Hiva. Nuku Hiva is part of the Marquesas Islands, which is part of French Polynesia. People know where Tahiti is, which is the center of the French Polynesian area, but it also includes other islands called the Society Islands, the Tuamotu Islands, and specifically the Marquesas Islands, which are about 800 miles to the north and east of Tahiti. It's about 2,000 miles south of Hawaii. How do you get there? There are flights on Air Tahiti from the island of Tahiti. We actually arrived by ship on a cruise ship. There are other cruise ships that make more frequent callings. This one is based out of Tahiti, as is this cargo passenger ship. An interesting thing. But a lot of people just get in their private sailboats and take off and end up here on the way to somewhere else. Nuku Hiva is about 130 square miles. The airport is located up in the desert area in the north, Taiohae. The capital is located to the south. The commercial port on Nuku Hiva is Taiohae Bay, is also where a lot of trans-Pacific sailboats stop and resupply. It is a delightful area. You'll see no high-rises here. This is not Hawaii. About 1,500 people live here in this village. The total population for the island is only 3,000, but you can expect a lot of the commercial conveniences here. Hospitals, post offices, even streetlights. Shopping, of course, wherever you go. This is French Polynesia. Tourism is important, but you can also get whatever else you would like at the general store. They have a very nice tourist office. They're actually very polite. There is quite a bit of lodging. This is the Pearl Lodge, the best on the island, but there's other services as well. The official language is French and Polynesian, but English is spoken by most people in the tourist business. Taiohae has a good beach, but this is not really a beach destination. Sandflies called no-nos are troublesome, and most of the coast is quite rocky. The principal landmark along the waterfront is Nuku Hiva. Built in 2017, it stands 40 feet high and has quite a meaning. The ancestral strength inherited from the woman Tiki, the warden of tradition and knowledge, the warrior Tiki steps forward to master his future. Nuku Hiva is built on a warrior site. It is the site of Old Fort Madison, a United States military installation, a naval base in the Pacific, founded by Captain David Porter, who occupied Nuku Hiva briefly in the 1813 during the War of 1812 against the British. He was chastened by the Nuku Hiva warriors, which we'll talk about in a bit. Next place of interest is Tuhia Tumihia. Tuhia is a gathering area for dance and social gatherings. It's usually connected to a religious site as well, but here we're seeing some local school kids. There's been a resurgence of Polynesian pride since the 1980s. Our next stop is going to be the Catholic Cathedral of Notre Dame, named after, of course, the one in Paris. This is nothing like it. The original building, built in the 1870s after the French took control of the island, was destroyed. Only the front part remains. A newer cathedral was built in order to honor the traditional Polynesian site that once stood here. Stones from that excavation are placed in the exterior wall. The carvings are quite interesting. They're made out of local wood by local artists. Here we have Jesus in the garden of breadfruit. The artist didn't know what olives were. Breadfruit was common, so we have breadfruit. The Marquesas Islands are perfect areas for the growth of breadfruit. They were the principal crop that sustained the populations for centuries. Our local guide, Deborah, speaks excellent English. She's taking us on a cross-island tour. Transportation might have been a bit rough, but it was actually pretty nice to be in the back. You got to see everything, and the air conditioning was good. There is a paved road that connects the principal spots on the island as well as the airport. Polynesian settlement started in Nuku Hiva around 1000 AD, with migration starting in Fiji and Samoa using double-hulled ocean-crossing canoes. The Marquesas Islands were settled before either Hawaii or Tahiti. Modern reenactments have shown the seaworthiness of this type of transportation. The Europeans first came in 1595 from Spain and Peru, with the island chain named for the Marquis of Peru. James Cook, of course, visited in many of his travels. We've already talked about David Porter's brief stay, but there was the French who finally controlled the islands in 1870. Sandalwood and whales is what brought the Europeans and the Americans to the Marquesas. Sandalwood, a fragrant wood, was highly valued in the Orient. Whales were valued throughout the world because their oil was used for lubricant as well as light at night. When whales became scarce in the Atlantic, the Pacific became the area of harvesting next. The peak of the whaling industry was between 1810 and 1860. The Marquesas, and specifically Nuke Hiva, was preferred as a stopover for whale captains to refit and replenish supplies because cannibalism was feared by the crew. Herman Melville, a whale ship seaman, deserted his ship on Nuke Hiva in 1842, went to a valley he called Taipivai, where he then later caught another whale ship back and wrote a book about his experience, which was named Taipivai. We are going to his Taipivai Valley next. As you recall, David Porter in 1813 briefly occupied Nuku Hiva. He landed an assault troop of 2,000 Polynesians and his ship at this valley and was soundly defeated. He tried again a week later, only with 300 of his American crew. The Polynesians had had enough, and was met with passive resistance. They just basically all left. The Polynesians didn't have troubles with the Europeans. They valued the trading alliances that they had with them, and therefore really didn't want to fight Mr. Porter. That area of craft and trade is still going on, and Taipivai is a place where you can get some of the best Marquesian products. But Mr. Porter's experience, as he reported back, solidified the concept that the valley of Taipivai was a place to be avoided. Melville and a companion named Toby were the first people who really spent any time in this remote and isolated society. He romanticized his own experiences, but he did tell the truth about the Polynesian culture. Melville became famous again in the 1950s with the movie Moby Dick, but his real fame was in the 1840s with his book Taipivai. A large part of the book's draw was a fictionalized romance that Melville had with a beautiful maiden named Taiohae, scandalous in his day but of no account in ours. But his description of the actual island, the people, how they dressed, and where they lived, was quite accurate. And then he described these massive building sites, which he actually had a hard time believing that the natives built themselves. But they did, and we're off to see them next. The mountain road to Hatui is steeper, narrower, has more curves, but it is paved all the way, and you see some interesting sights. Wild horses roam the island, as does wild cattle, and wild pigs brought both by the Europeans and by the Polynesians inhabit the island. But it's a beautiful drive up and through the forest, and you could say it's the jungle as well. Waterfalls galore. Our tour guide stops and has a little ritual where she announces her presence to the valley, an old Polynesian custom. The village of Hatui is quite small, 150 people is all, but we're here to see the archaeological site. first described in 1957. The Polynesians, of course, knew of its existence for a long time and actually told the early anthropologists of the site that they had actually been there when it was in use and described some of the ceremonies. A pepe is a stone terrace. This shows a traditional Nuku Hiva home. The banyan tree designates the religious site. They were purposely planted, this one being 800 years old, dates back to 1250 AD. It's a massive thing. The central plaza is quite large, over 300 feet long. This was a multiple clan gathering area. Each clan would have had their smaller pia or gathering area. We're off to see more as you wander through the jungle. It's just a fascinating, enchanting experience. Here we come across some petroglyphs showing fish, sharks, and a turtle, which is quite important. The candle nut is used quite extensively throughout the tropics. Here, not only did it provide a source of light, but the burnt shell of the candle nut was ground into very fine powder mixed with water and used for tattoo ink. This is the jungle, and you want to have bug protection in here. But it is a magical place. There's hundreds of archaeological sites on Nuku Hiva. This one just happens to be the best. The village of Hatui is actually a surprisingly nice little area for 150 people. Paved roads, clean and orderly. The inhabitants of Hatui are the ones who reconstructed the archaeological site we just visited. A remarkable feat for a village of 150 people. There is a Catholic church here. Looking at the size, you wonder, 150 people? Well, maybe. The road ends, or the paved road ends here in Hatui, so if you're going to go someplace beyond, you will need a horse. There are some very nice coves with better beaches, but horseback's the only way. Have the nice restaurant where the tourists like us stop and get our meals, and then an interesting end of meal ceremony. For some reason, eels just creep me out. This completes our tour of the island. We returned by the same route we came. This is, in fact, a small island. The charm of Nuke Hiva is that it is still so Polynesian-y. If you read Melville's book Taipivai before you come, you can see the glimpses of Polynesia that he did. The other thing about this island is the tendering system is terrible. You come by a big cruise ship, expect long lines. As Tracy and I travel the world, we leave a little memento of our being there, heart in the sand. This one here at Nuku Hiva has a special feeling for us. Nuku Hiva is one of our favorite places in the South Pacific. There are other places. This one is just so nice. One of the islands of the Society Island group, closer to Tahiti, is Raiatea. A beautiful little spot. It has great beaches. We had a wonderful time there, but that's another time on Travel Time with Robert and Tracy. This has been presented by Trust Me Travel. Nuku Hiva is a charming area. I'd love to go back, spend more time. They have snorkeling, they have scuba diving, they have hiking trails galore. It's magical.